Last week, Malawi's Parliamentary Committee on International Relations recommended temporary travel restrictions on citizens seeking informal employment in South Africa without the proper documentation. Government says that the move is aimed at reducing the growing cost of repatriating stranded nationals. However, Chifipa Mhango, Chief Economist and Executive Director, Economic Research and Strategy at the Don Consultancy Group, says this may not be the right solution. And he joins us now to tell us why. A very good evening to you, Mr. Mhango. Good to have you with us once again on Africa in Business.
Good evening, Thami, and good evening to all your listeners across the continents.
So this is the conundrum that many African countries have found themselves in at the moment, having to repatriate some of their citizens back to their home countries. What do you make of Malawi's reaction to, first and foremost, the costs of repatriating Malawans back to Malawi, and what this means then for relations between the two countries?
Well, in any environment, obviously, when you incur cost which you did not budget for, obviously it comes as a point of concern, which I think from the point of view of the parliamentary process, raising that concern was quite understandable in the sense that you always want to have a situation those funds are actually utilized for other developmental purposes rather than in this kind of process of repatriation. But I think nonetheless, it's more about looking at to say what are the main push factors why Malawians at a young age are trying to find their way to be in South Africa illegally. I think that to me it's a more aspect that needs to be looked at. So the root causes of that should actually be debated.
Tell us more about why you say that this may not be a good solution. I think you've highlighted perhaps going back to the drawing board, perhaps a bit of introspection on Malawi's part as to why Malawans are leaving the country. But you say that this is not a good solution, putting this travel restriction. Why so?
Well, because it is in a way reactive. Because one has to look at what is the core push factors that are causing this. I think it's more about the economic degeneration of the country, which is pushing most of these young people who are unemployed in Malawi. The industries have actually been closed down in Malawi, and they are looking at the opportunities outside. Now, the question is that when you restrict that, to what level are you going to prolong this process of restriction? So if it's something where you say, okay, now you're going to restrict this movement for 3 months. Now, what happens after 3 months is a question. So if you have not addressed the push factors that are causing those that situation for people to actually take any different approach to leave the country, some are leaving without even having a proper documentation such as passports, I think it reflects more around how government is managing this thing from the point of view of addressing the economic challenges the country is facing. So anything that involves temporary ban actually has to look at the long-term solutions rather than short-term solutions.
And how do you propose, Mr. Mhango, they handle the long-term solutions and while curtailing further movement of Malawans from South Africa to Malawi? How does one actually balance the two? Because if they don't do anything immediately to stop the exodus from their own countries, they will still have to deal with this issue of repatriation, which is, as you said in your beginning statement, an unbudgeted cost item. How do you propose they balance the two?
Well, I think there are 3 elements of categorization of what's happening here. One is that you've got people leaving Malawi where they're coming to South Africa on a 30-day holiday visa, and then they're overstaying. So some maybe go back, but obviously they overstay maybe like 2 months or 3 months. Now, in that element, those ones now need to be properly educated in terms of the implications around how they're managing their travel patterns into South Africa. Because once you are prohibited as a traveler, obviously it also affects them from the point of view of economic opportunities if they are doing business. The other category is the second point where we're talking about those that come to South Africa for using the 30 days visa, but then instead afterwards they start now working without even having work permits. Now, though, that actually also need to be educated in that process in the point of view, no, it is actually illegal to do that. So all that I think it's also a question about how when you're managing those people like that, you can't then try to say restrict them because you don't even know at a border post what are the reasons for their travel. So if you're going to be restricting everyone, you say no, you cannot travel. The question is, how then do you manage that process? Are you going to be interviewing each and everyone at the border to ensure that what are they coming to do in South Africa, and then in the end, even though they are living there, they can even say that no, they can even lie. So realistically, I think it's very difficult to manage that process. That's what you are saying. But the other element, which is the third category of the travelers, is the one which is the illegal aspect, whereby no, you travel without even having a passport from Malawi. Now the question that no, how does that happen? Obviously, I think it reflects quite easily that no, there is some element of corruption taking place within the border management system, and then you deal with it from the point of view of intelligence gathering to understand how that happens. I think that's how you handle elements like that, than just taking an approach where you say, no, you're going to be restricting everyone from coming to South Africa, because now it also becomes discriminatory in approach, because now in the case, you start now profiling. Now, are you going to be doing that only for road travelers, or are you going to be doing that also for the people using the airplane traveling to South Africa? So we don't create a law in a country which is based on profiling or discrimination.
Right. So the issue of discrimination there, you're bringing out. Would it be humane to stop people from traveling to other countries for survival, if survival really is the reason why they're traveling? You mentioned unemployment in Malawi, and you mentioned several industries being closed. Would it be humane for government to actually stop them from traveling to try and find and create a better life for themselves elsewhere?
Well, I think that's a very difficult question to pose, because the thing that no, you must remember, no, migration is happening across the board, be it in Southern African region here, be it also what you are seeing there on the Mediterranean, people taking sacrifices. I think, to me, I still move to the point that no, what does it tell you about this situation whereby no, all these over 40,000 people have actually come in one go from South Africa? It tells you that no, much as the repatriation, the people who have been repatriated have come to Malawi back with different kind of skills across sectors. Now, I think, to me, it's also an opportunity rather than a burden to the nation, because these people have come with skills, which is a national asset in terms which has to be mobilized towards industrial growth and shared prosperity for the country. So the government can take a different approach in terms of turning relief towards productive investment. And that means undertaking a national skills mapping exercise, creating a national industrial labor database, matching skills, industrial opportunities, focusing on capabilities rather than actually looking at just unemployment numbers. So if you match that with the kind of sectors that in Malawi can actually take advantage of, such as clothing and textile, the retail industry, supply chain in terms of Uber drivers, or whether it is digital economy, those are some of the areas where most of the people who have actually gone back to Malawi have actually been acquired a proper service-oriented kind of skill that can be utilized and develop industries in Malawi. I think that is how I approach it.
I mean, you've touched on, Mr. Mhango, some solutions that perhaps the government can be looking at in order to re-stimulate the economy and provide employment for those who are fleeing the country. But in terms of the natural resources, what is Malawi producing? You mentioned, clothing and textile, for example, as far as finished products are concerned. But natural resources, what do they offer?
Well, Malawi has got a abundance of natural resources from the point of view of the lake, which is quite well endowed in terms of whether it's fishing, whether you're talking about development of tourism industry along the lakeshore areas of Malawi. So that means that no, the hospitality industry is well catered for in Malawi in terms of expansion of the hotels, restaurants, catering customer services, and most of these young people from Malawi who have actually been repatriated we're actually working in those industries in South Africa. If you look at the clothing and textile industry, for instance, Malawi is well endowed in that area. It's one of the big countries when it comes to production of cotton in Malawi. But then that industry was actually more or less I can say, liberalized quite quickly to the point where it actually destroyed the Malawi industrial base. So that's a solution there in terms of utilizing that. If you look at most of the ones that are coming, we are coming into Durban, working in Durban from Malawi, we're actually in that clothing and textile industry. They acquired those skills from Malawi. They are also advanced those skills while in South Africa. So it's a question of just building those industries back in Malawi. I can bring the element of logistical and online delivery system. Those people that are doing working for these grocery chains, most of those ones who are riding those bicycles were actually motorbikes. They actually can actually be utilized, because Malawi is not highly developed when it comes to online delivery services. The construction sector, for instance, bricklaying, plumbing, electrical, welding, roof tiling, and all the other kind of related services in the construction industry. Malawians have actually been working in those industries in South Africa. So I think realistically, if you look at also deep down, retail industry, manufacturing sectors in South Africa, furniture industry, agriculture, those are the industries that Malawi can match in terms of rebuild the economy, whereby these repatriates from Malawi are actually now being taken advantage of as not only repatriates, but also those that are returning with workforce into the Malawi as an engine for economic development in Malawi.
Mr. Chifipa Mhango, thank you so much for your insight there, as well as some of the recommendations that he has in place and the plethora of opportunity that it can be created in Malawi for Malawians to be able to live and have decent lives and livelihoods in their own homeland without becoming an immigration burden to surrounding neighboring countries. It's exactly 6:31 Central African time. Thank you very much, Mr. Chifipa Mhango.
Thank you, Madeleine.
Thank you, sir. He is Chief Economist and Executive Director for Economic Research and Strategy at the Don Consultancy Group.